Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session, Bringing AWS Benefits to Apple Developers with EC2 Mac Instances. My name is Stephanie Hsu, and I'm a Principal Specialist for macOS on AWS. Joining me later in this presentation will be Colin Caulfield, Lead iOS Engineer at Flipboard. In this session, I'll be providing an overview of EC2 Mac, the use case it's designed for, and how to get started. I'll then turn it over to Colin from Flipboard, who will be sharing his experience migrating their production workloads to EC2 Mac and the impact it had on their iOS development pipeline. I'll conclude by covering a few of the frequently asked questions we hear from customers. Let's get started. Amazon EC2 offers the broadest and deepest compute platform with a wide variety of choice across processors, memory, storage, networking, operating systems, and purchase models. We offer the fastest processors in the cloud, and we are the only cloud with up to 400 gigabits per second Ethernet networking. We have the most powerful GPU instances for machine learning training and graphics workloads, as well as the lowest cost per inference instances in the cloud. Today, we have over 400 instance types for virtually every workload and business need. Until this past December, however, AWS was not able to address workloads that run on macOS due to the hardware and software requirements of the application development lifecycle for the Apple ecosystem. This includes applications for iPhone, iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, Apple TV, and Safari. Beginning with the build phase, through the testing, signing, and finally publishing to the App Store, the application development process for Apple depends on Xcode, which is Apple's integrated development environment. Xcode, as Apple developers know, can only run on macOS, and macOS must run on Apple hardware. Without support for macOS on AWS, Apple application development on AWS was not possible. And without macOS support, we were excluding a huge community from taking advantage of the AWS cloud, the Apple developer community. Prior to the availability of EC2 Mac instances, customers had three choices for building their Apple applications, each with their own limitations. The first is on-premises. In this case, customers are running and maintaining a fleet of Mac computers, whether they're Mac Minis or Mac Pros, that are running out of office locations, in data centers as isolated servers, in closets, or even under desks. These environments require capital expenditure and typically have a 3 to 5 year depreciation schedule that can limit the ability to upgrade and take advantage of the latest innovations. Alternatively, customers may be using a specialized Mac as a service provider who offers rentals of Apple hardware from co-location facilities, primarily in the US. The contracts may be month to month or longer term, but typically have a minimum commitment of 30 days, which can have implications for scaling up and down quickly. The third way customers may be building their Apple applications is with a continuous integration as a service or CI as a service provider. While these providers offer fully managed build services, in exchange, customers have less control and customization capabilities. When building EC2 Mac, we were looking to address three key challenges. The first is infrastructure overhead. The job of managing on-premises fleets of Mac servers often falls on developers, requiring them to spend time configuring, operating, maintaining, and upgrading the environment instead of doing what they do best, which is building creative and useful new applications. The second is maintaining a disparate build environment for macOS. In most cases, customers are having to manage an independent environment for their macOS development pipelines, separate from their Android and Windows builds. Whether it's the last remaining data center footprint or supported by a standalone service provider, this can add operational complexity and create security risks. Lastly is the inability to scale quickly. Development lifecycle timelines are limited by available infrastructure. During times of peak demand, build and test queues may increase and overwhelm resources, leading to delays in time to market. All of these challenges together lead to physical and operational overhead that gets in the way of innovation. On November 30th, AWS announced the general availability of EC2 Mac instances, making macOS available on AWS for the first time. With EC2 Mac, AWS is the only cloud provider to support every major OS: Linux, Windows, and now macOS. These instances were built and designed for Apple developers to enable them to focus on code, not infrastructure management, to unify their cross-platform DevOps pipelines and benefit from the higher agility, elasticity, and security that EC2 provides. And as an EC2 instance, developers can now access the broader AWS ecosystem. As we'll discuss further, EC2 is integrated with services like Elastic Block Storage, AWS Systems Manager, and AWS CloudWatch, to name a few. Here you can see what an EC2 Mac instance looks like from the inside. You can see it's an actual Mac Mini sitting inside of an EC2 chassis. While engineering EC2 Mac, it was a priority for our product teams to ensure that this instance looked and felt like any other EC2 instance, with the only difference being that macOS is the operating system. So, from using the same APIs you use to launch Linux or Windows-based EC2 instances today, to building a robotic arm to power the Mac Mini on and off, there was a lot of thought put into every aspect of this instance. And here you can see how the Mac Mini connects to the AWS Nitro system through the Thunderbolt 3 connection, providing storage and network connectivity and enabling it as a fully managed compute instance on EC2. EC2 Mac instances are built on Intel-based 2018 Mac Minis and powered by the AWS Nitro system. These are much more than just Macs in the cloud. The innovations of Nitro make it possible to offer Mac Mini computers as fully integrated and managed bare metal compute instances. Each EC2 Mac instance offers 6 physical cores, 12 logical cores, and 32 gigs of memory, fully dedicated to your workload. Just like other EC2 instances, you boot off of an Elastic Block Storage or EBS volume. You can access up to 16 EBS volumes in total, with up to 8 gigabits per second of EBS bandwidth. AWS Nitro system also enables up to 10 gigabits per second of network throughput, while the Nitro security chip provides hardware root of trust, so you can be sure that your data is secure. So while you should think of EC2 Mac instances like any other EC2 instance, there are some usage specifications to be aware of. First, EC2 Mac instances are available as single-tenant, bare metal, dedicated host instance type called Mac1.metal. It works just like any other EC2 dedicated host, where you first allocate the host, then spin up the instance. The entire EC2 instance is dedicated to you with no shared tenancy. Think of this model as if you were leasing a physical server from EC2. Mac1.metal instances run on a one-to-one basis with an allocated host. You do have the ability to run virtual machines on top of the instance themselves through Type 2 virtualization software, such as VMware Fusion or Anka from Virtu. Second, like other EC2 dedicated hosts, EC2 Mac instances are billed by the second, but there is a 24-hour minimum allocation period. After the initial 24-hour period expires, the EC2 Mac host can be released at any time. Just to reiterate, the billing happens at the host level. While the dedicated host is allocated, you can spin up and down instances and VMs as you like. There are no additional charges for instances or virtual machines. Third, the intended use case for EC2 Mac is application development or CI/CD pipelines for Apple devices. This includes software development, building software from source code, and automated testing. All of the specifications that you see on this slide are required by Apple's Software License Agreement, or SLA, for macOS. In November 2020, Apple released macOS Big Sur and added a new section to the SLA called Leasing for Permitted Developer Services that applies to macOS usage on AWS. We encourage you to review it for more information. Let's talk about how you can get started with EC2 Mac today. EC2 Mac is available in 5 regions now: Northern Virginia, Ohio, and Portland in the US, Dublin in EMEA, and Singapore in Asia Pacific. And we'll be expanding access to other regions throughout 2021. For launching your instance, EC2 Mac offers Amazon Machine Images, or AMIs, for Big Sur, Catalina, and Mojave. In addition to macOS, these AMIs include tools like EC2 System Monitoring, AWS Systems Manager Agent, and the latest Xcode command line tools, making it easy to launch an EC2 Mac instance and get started. We highly recommend that customers customize their own set of derivative AMIs with the specific software, such as the version of Xcode that you need, and tools required. These customized AMIs can then be both shared and used to launch EC2 Mac with the exact configurations and software stack you need. To log into EC2 Mac, you have 2 choices. You can connect to EC2 Mac via SSH to get to the command line interface. From there, you can also launch a VNC client such as Apple Remote Desktop for graphic interface or screen sharing. We recommend that you do this over SSH for security purposes. EC2 Mac is available through 2 purchase options today: on-demand and savings plans. With on-demand, you can launch EC2 Mac instances as dedicated hosts as needed. They're billed per second with a minimum allocation period of 24 hours. At the end of the 24-hour period, there are no further commitments. With savings plans, you can access savings of up to 44% off with a 1 or 3-year commitment. Both instance and compute savings plans are available. Now, one of the great things about EC2 is that this is not an either-or situation. With EC2 Mac, you can launch a macOS host that is available for use within minutes, meaning you no longer need to purchase for your peak requirements. We recommend that you use both savings plans and on-demand to take advantage of the elasticity that EC2 Mac instances offer. You can adopt savings plans to cover steady state day-to-day usage, then scale with on-demand when usage requirements peak, before release, for example, and scale back down when the demand subsides. Let's summarize the key benefits of EC2 Mac instances starting from the left. By bringing Apple application development pipelines to EC2 Mac instances, you can benefit from a fully managed, scalable Mac infrastructure, enabling builds to run concurrently and delivering new apps to market faster. Next is the ability to unify your heterogeneous DevOps pipelines. With the availability of macOS on AWS, you can, for the first time, consolidate your application build pipelines for Android, Windows, and Apple in a single environment, eliminating fragmented development workflows and accelerating the pace of innovation. Third is amplified developer productivity. With EC2 Mac, customers get the familiar EC2 interface combined with integration to services like Amazon Elastic File System, which enables developers to share code repositories, AWS Identity Access Manager to provide granular access control, and Amazon CloudWatch, which provides application and infrastructure monitoring, enabling developers to collaborate easily and get to work. Lastly, by making macOS available in AWS around the globe, we enable developers to build and test for Apple applications from anywhere, so they can stay productive regardless of where they are. And throughout 2021, we'll continue rolling EC2 Mac instances across more AWS global regions. Now I'm excited to turn this over to Colin Caulfield, lead iOS engineer at Flipboard, to speak about their experience with EC2 Mac.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's great to be here. I'd like to talk about my experience moving Flipboard's iOS build machine over to an EC2 Mac. So for those who don't know, Flipboard is an award-winning app that curates news and information for all your interests, and it's presented in a magazine-style format. So we have complex layouts with text over images and even a unique flipping animation. So how does this all work behind the scenes? Well, we're already heavily invested in Amazon AWS. We have hundreds of instances doing things such as content ingestion, so grabbing stories from the internet, extracting metadata, We also use machine learning to categorize stories. So for example, is this a story about a US election or football? And then on top of that, there's some nuances. For example, is this about European football or American football? We also do recommendations. So based on what a user is interested in, what stories should we recommend to them? Then we serve these customized feeds to millions of users using our iOS and Android apps throughout the world, and also our web page. We also send breaking news, notifications, and emails. And we maintain a curation ecosystem where users can create their own magazines and share them with others. So that's the back end, but I'm on the front end iOS team, and our needs for servers are not as sophisticated. So what do we do for our iOS build machine? Well, in the past, unfortunately, our build machine was just a 2018 Mac Mini hiding in a closet covered in cables. And clearly this is not on EC2. So despite his small stature, this machine, effectively known as Bender, is responsible for running up to 3 internal betas a day, making sure the builds are not broken, distributing those betas to internal and external testers. We also do our App Store builds and our App Store submissions with all the rigmarole around certificates and provisioning profiles. And we also do UI automation testing, so simulating gestures on the device and making sure the app behaves the way that we think it should. So there's a lot of problems that we had here. One is the builds are extremely slow. So we're looking at 20 plus minutes. It's a mixed Objective-C Swift code base, so that always takes a long time to compile. We also have very sluggish VNC sessions where, the screen redraws slowly, you tap, you're waiting a bunch of seconds. Do I need to retap? Machine went down a lot, no monitoring tools. And when it did go down, we had to ask for a person to go in and flip the switch. And of course, when COVID hit, those emails got a lot harder to write, asking someone to drive into the office. So we knew we needed to do something. We tried a few other services and we just weren't really happy with the reliability. And that's when I found out that Amazon was doing Mac on EC2. So we did a trial of this. It took me about 3 days to move everything over. One day was just setting up the instance, getting familiarized. I was new to a lot of AWS, so I had to figure that out for myself, but it was quite easy. So in a day, I got all the software installed, VNC sessions going, accounts created, etc. Then it took me about 2 more days to move all the Jenkins jobs and other tools from our old machine over to the new one. And I found it was really easy to use S3 to do that. So what were the results? Well, the migration was a huge success, and that's probably why I'm here talking to you about it. Build times have gone down to sub 5 minutes, which is great compared to 20 minutes in the past. As you can see on the right-hand side here, I have a picture of Slack, and we get a message every time a beta is created and finished. And as you can see here, it took 5 minutes, and people are just ecstatic about that. This enables a lot of nice work where we could try things that we normally wouldn't do because the expense of making a beta is just so low. Another thing is that our UI automation tests are now sub 1 hour, where they used to be 3 hours. And on this point, I'm really excited about potentially moving to M1 Max in the future, where the automation would run even faster. A few other things I like. The download speeds are super fast. We know Apple makes us re-download Xcode all the time, and now you don't have to take a lunch break when that happens. And also the VNC sessions are really smooth like butter, which is a personal favorite of mine. So a few other things that I really liked here. It was really easy to figure out for someone who was not very familiar. Anytime I had a question, I could just go on YouTube, Stack Overflow, or Amazon's own docs and find an answer very quickly. Now I'm learning about more advanced tools such as AMIs, snapshots, monitoring, etc. And one thing I was worried about, that everything would have to be done through the command line. Not at all. It's really easy to do stuff with screen sharing. And we know on Mac, sometimes there's not a command line option for everything. And lastly, I would say the setup is very reliable. I've only rebooted once, and it was a false alarm. And other than that, everything's just been smooth sailing. So, a lot of times these kind of projects, you jump into them, and by the time you get to the end, it didn't work out the way you were hoping. This is an example of a project where everything went right, it was easy, and I'm just super happy with the finished results. So maybe that'll work out for you as well. Back to you, Stephanie.
Colin, thank you so much for sharing how EC2 Mac has changed iOS development at Flipboard. I hope you bid Bender a fond farewell. For the last few minutes here, I'd like to cover a few of the frequently asked questions we hear from customers. The first question, can I share access to Amazon EC2 Mac hosts across accounts? And the answer is yes. You can share access to EC2 Mac dedicated hosts across account IDs, organizational units, or the entire AWS organization via AWS Resource Access Manager. Additionally, because Amazon EC2 Mac supports up to 16 EBS volumes, you can actually separate users via EBS volumes and then leverage Identity Access Manager to control access. Next question, can I run smaller instance types on Amazon EC2 Mac? Well, because EC2 Mac instances are only available as bare metal, we only offer a single instance size, Mac1.metal. But you can run smaller virtual machines using Type 2 software. So as I mentioned earlier, we do support Type 2 virtualization, such as VMware Fusion, Anka from VR2, Oracle VirtualBox, any Type 2 software will work. And you can use that to spin VMs on top of the instance itself. Next question, are you planning to support the M1 Mac Mini? I'm happy to share that yes. The EC2 Mac instance built on the M1 Mac Mini is in development now and will be available later this year. Next question, will I be charged for the instances or VMs I run on my Amazon EC2 Mac host? And that answer is no. The Amazon EC2 Mac is built at the host level. So instances or VMs that run on the host do not incur additional charges. Can I install macOS applications on Amazon EC2 Mac instances? And yes, you can. So when you allocate a dedicated Mac1 host and you run the Mac1.metal instance on top of it, you have the same level of control and access that you do on a Linux or Windows Amazon EC2 instance. So just remember, Amazon EC2 Mac is EC2. And last question, can I run macOS High Sierra or earlier on EC2 Mac? And that answer is yes, you can, but through virtual machines. So because the 2018 Mac Mini shipped with macOS Mojave, it is the earliest version of macOS that can boot directly onto the EC2 Mac instance. You can, however, leverage Type 2 virtualization, as we've discussed, to spin up VMs with older versions of macOS. So that concludes the session on EC2 Mac. As a reminder, AWS training and certification offers a broad range of free in-person and virtual training, certifications, education programs, and enterprise resources. For more information, please go to aws.com/training. Thank you for your time today, and please do take the time to complete the session survey. We value your feedback. Hope you enjoy the rest of AWS Summit.